Okay, this is probably my favorite tool on the farm. It's an Austrian scythe, and it's very different than scythes that you probably have seen pictures of, the old American scythe with the heavy steel or heavy metal blade, typically a really heavy handle, which they call the snathe. This is a very light tool. The blade itself, be amazed if it weighs a pound. This is about an 18-inch blade, maybe a little bit longer. Uh, it's from Austria, the blade is, and the handle, which is they call the snathe, is made in Maine by the Scythe Supply Company. We'll show a link to that down below in our show descriptions. It's a very simple tool. It's only got really basically three parts: the snathe handles, locking D-ring to keep the blade on the snathe, and the blade itself. The thing I like about this is, besides being light and a very well balanced tool, you can see I'm just basically holding this with, two fingers. If you find the center of gravity on it, you can just keep it balanced on your hand with no problem, which means it's very light to swing. What that means is you can use this for quite a bit of time and not get tired. I've used string trimmers of all kinds, and the nice thing about this is it's light, it doesn't fatigue me, no sound other than the cutting of the grass and the birds chirping. The perfect time to cut any grass or brush or anything like that with this guy is in the morning before the sun reaches the high point in the sky. Usually by that point the grass is still a little bit damp from the dew, but has enough stiffness to it that when the blade hits it, it cuts really well. Okay, we have several blades that we use on the farm. This one's called a ditch blade, and it's kind of a multi-purpose blade. It can, being shorter than a grass blade typically would be almost out to here. That'd be something somebody would use for haying, and it would be a very efficient way of cutting a pretty large, what they call a swath. Okay, this will cut a fairly large swath. When you do a full swing, you can get about almost 6 to 7 feet on it. With a 30-inch blade, you'd probably be, even more, another 20% or better larger swath, which makes for faster work. But this is designed for clearing and basically difficult things like hills, ditches, things of that nature. We also have a second blade, which is called a brush blade. It's a much shorter, stouter blade. We'll show a picture of it in the video here. And we use that for clearing out small brush like blackberries or saplings that got started in the wrong place. It shouldn't be there. And it's very efficient. It will cut up to 3/4 inch in size. This will cut easily something that's a 1/2 inch in size, even if it's semi-woody, even with ditch blade. But the brush blade is really a workhorse. And like I said, it's very light to use. So let's show some examples of how we cut and how we use the blade. Okay, this area right here is a little too rough for a mower, being the steepness of it, and also there's a number of obstacles and things. That's the nice thing about this type of cutting is you can pretty much cut just like a string trimmer. You just let the blade float, and if you see obstacles or rocks, you can kind of lift the blade and go right over them. This is a lot of tansy ragwort in here we're trying to get rid of, and it's getting to the point where it's going to start to bloom, so we're going to whack this down today. And the blade itself, when you get started, what you want to do is make sure what's called the hafting angle, which means the blade, how far is the blade angled over. Depending on your size and what you're cutting, usually, though, most of the time the blade is all the way over to the right of the D-ring itself. You just make sure that's on tight. They give you a little Allen wrench, which we use to just make sure the blade won't move in the D-ring. and it's on there pretty tight, which it is. The first thing you always do before you get started is make sure your blade's clean. You can use a rag. I just kind of use my hand, just kind of go over it, make sure there's no rough spots on the blade, like if I hit something. Then we use a whetstone. Now, a lot of people, this might freak you out, but it's actually pretty easy to use. You just put it to the angle of the top of the blade, and the stone is already cut to the right angle. So then it's just a matter of going down, working down the blade, and then you just take the flat side on the back and one swipe over. That's it. That's all there is to it. And when you think about a string trimmer, and you got to take that top off, and you got to rewind the string on it, and then sometimes that thing gets jammed up. That's all there is to this. Okay, we're not going to be taking full swaths on this. This is, you want the blade to do the cutting. So it's going to be a matter of like hip rotation and using the blade sort of floating along the surface. You balance the blade with the back of your hand against your front. So that'll move the blade up or down. Okay, so cutting's really easy. You just pick your point and start to cut. As you can see, it goes right through that. And it's a gentle rocking motion, usually a movement. And you can cut pretty low. Nothing like the smell of ragweed in the morning.
Especially for the camera person. This is one of her major allergies.
Better to get it now than before it blooms, right? It's quite easy to walk up the hill and do your cutting. Okay, one of the things that people will probably be curious about is how often do you sharpen the blade? It's really dependent on what you're cutting. As you can hear, my neighbor is using the noisy weed whacker, working away, in a very jarring manner. And as you saw, as I did, just a very easy slicing. I'm already spent like 5 minutes on this, and I'm halfway through this bluff, and it's time to sharpen it. So it just depends. When you start to feel that the blade isn't cutting as smooth as it used to, or if it's maybe you feel like you got to put a little effort behind it to get it to cut, that's usually an indicator it's time to take out your whetstone, wipe off the blade, and give it another quick couple of swipes. It's also a great time too to recheck your hafting angle. Make sure that's staying. If you feel any rough spots on the blade, like maybe you go, I know I hit a rock, you might find a rough spot, which I've got one right here that's starting. And so that'll be an indicator when you get finished. If it doesn't get too much worse, you need to go peen the blade. And we'll show you the equipment for that. It's actually quite easy to do. So, one of the other things that I have always found with a weed eater on this place is we have a type of weed. I'm not sure what the exact name of it is, but it's has a tendency to cling and it can climb, and it's very viney when it reaches the point in June just before it goes to seed. And as you walk through it, it will stick to you. And once the seeds actually get mature, they act like little round burrs, and they'll stick in dog fur or your socks or wherever you're walking. Well, what I found with a string trimmer is once you get in there and you start cutting that stuff, that there's lots of times that particular type of weed won't slice up nice and neat and will actually start to wrap around the head of the weed eater, and then you got to stop and clean it off. That was one of the ones that was a real pain around here. I got a little patch of it right here, so I'll just show you, what a scythe does to this. It's brutal. Goodbye.
Doesn't stick to the blade either.
Nice, rolls up nice and neat. Throw it in your compost pile, do whatever you need to do to it. Now, one of the questions that folks might ask too about a scythe is saying, well, sure, you can cut, big broad areas of it real easy, but what happens when you get around a tree or something like that? How close can you cut? That's where the skill of the operator comes in. This blade is sharp from the heel all the way to the point. Okay, and so it's razor sharp, and so you should be able to get as close. You just got to take your time and kind of edge the stuff away and just do a slice. It's usually just a tug, and you can clean right up to a tree or a fence post. Sometimes you hear something and you think, oh, I hit a rock or something. Well, the rock may have hit the back of the blade, and what got stuck on it was probably just an old piece of twig or something, stump from something. So you can clean around these things really pretty easy. So I kind of feel, based on my experience with string trimmers and with this Austrian Scythe, I can cover more ground, less fatiguing, in the same amount of time with this scythe than I could with a string trimmer. I mean, sure, when the string trimmer is cutting and doing well, it's working pretty well and you can move along. But there was a lot more time that I spent, fixing the string, maybe accidentally damaging something because I got too close to it. Because that string, even though it's a polyethylene string, it spins at a real fast rate, and it can damage trees and shrubs and things of that nature pretty fast if you're not careful. But as you can see, I can get real close to the base of a plant, which is no problem. And if I do stick it, I'll know because I'll stop swinging. But the whole thing is you just slow down a little bit, plot your move and make it work. Okay, it took us, not counting the filming time in here, I don't know, probably 20 to 30 minutes to cut this entire bank. And part of it is it's a little difficult because it's on a slope and there's some rocks and things that you got to be kind of aware of. The nice thing about this is, again, a string trimmer could flip a rock up in your face, so you got to wear, the appropriate safety gear for that. But this won't have that problem. It's laid down the grass, it looks a little rough, but once we mow this lower area, we can get the big mower in here and take care of that. Then we'll rake this stuff down pretty quick and haul it out of here to our compost pile. If need be, we can go back over it one more time with a scythe. You know, the other refuse is out of the way. We'll find any spots we missed, and that'll be it. Now, one of the things I failed to mention earlier too about the scythe is scythes are they're designed to be specific to the people because everybody's got a little bit different height. So what they'll do is they'll take a couple of measurements. They're going to want to know your overall height in inches, and then they're going to want to know the distance, which is basically a cubit, from here to here, and they're also going to want to know one last measurement would be how far out your arm goes. So the idea behind it is that these things are then they know exactly where to put the measurement for the handle and exactly what the overall size of the scythe should be. So if you're a basketball player who's say 6'10", they're going to give you a significantly longer scythe than I've got. So the whole point of it is it's size to you. It's a very personal tool. So if I handed this off to my wife, who's 5'5", and she started using it, she would quickly probably fatigue out because she'd always have to keep compensating for, you know, it not being sized right to her. It's kind of like using the wrong golf clubs. Same idea.
Does it bother your back?
No, it doesn't. That's the thing is the blade is, when done right, is resting on the top of the ground. It's cutting right at the base of the grass. So you're not having to hold it up, or you're not chopping at it. Now, if you're swinging and slicing, so that's the whole point. It's a slice. It's not a chop. When you find yourself chopping at something, then there's something wrong with the blade. The blade's too dull, the hafting angle is wrong, maybe you got the wrong blade for the wrong application, you know, trying to cut brush with something that isn't designed to cut brush. And what you're going to find is you're going to fatigue out pretty fast, and you're also putting a lot more stress on the scythe itself. One of the things that happens a lot is the first thing that breaks is typically when somebody's doing a lot of chopping is the top is this handle right here. The top of it will break either at the spindle, or it'll snap in the scythe. The second thing that'll happen is scythes will typically crack and split. This is a really heavy duty, I think it's a hickory, so it's, you know, it's a pretty tough wood, but this is not designed to be an axe. So the whole point is you're slicing and not chopping. You're swinging with the hips as much as possible when you need to swing, or if you are taking short, as you may have noticed many times in here, I was taking very short slices. It's still, the whole point is the base of the blade here is on the ground. So it's not fatiguing at all. So when we come back, we'll show you on our next video, how do we sharpen the blade? How do we peen it? That's a whole kind of lesson unto itself. It's not hard, but we'll definitely cover that in the next video. We'll show some snapshots of our brush blade, and also in the next video we'll show use of the brush blade and how we do it. So I want to thank you for watching today, and if you like what you see, please hit the subscribe button and hit the like button. Give us a thumbs up. Those are always helpful. Any comments you make are always appreciated. Even though maybe sometimes I can't get to them on a timely basis, I certainly do try to get there and get them read, and I do appreciate it. So again, thanks for watching. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.